Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? I'm glad to be here today to share with you this lesson about boundaries. I think boundaries are something we're all trying to continue to work on and get better at. And this material from sensory motor psychotherapy, in my opinion, is really excellent. And I've, been in this business a long time. I've read a lot of stuff about boundaries. I've taught a lot of stuff about boundaries. But when I saw this, I was like, you know what? This is some good stuff. So I'm pleased to be able to share it with you today. It's a lot of material. It's a little long. So if you can't finish it today, come back another day. But I promise you, this is some good stuff. All right. So without further ado, let's get this up here. All right. So this one's called a somatic sense of boundaries. So the somatic part is one of the unique elements that sensory motor psychotherapy offers. So it's about using your body to help us sense when we need a boundary and to set a boundary. So like you can see in this opening picture here, that woman looks like she means business, right? You could tell by her body language that she's setting a clear boundary. And we could get better at doing that ourselves, all right? And that's one of the things we're going to go over today. All right, so before we start, we might as well define it, right? So what is a boundary? Okay, so look at this picture on the top. So the boundary is kind of like a limit or a barrier or an invisible border, or sometimes a visible border around us. And there's different types of borders. Some are very rigid, some are very loose, and sometimes we need to change how rigid or loose our boundaries are based on a situation. But essentially, in whatever form it takes, a boundary is a limit or a barrier. It's the space between me and you. It determines what we let in and what we let out. So I have a picture there of someone straining some macaroni. And see that strainer? So the strainer lets out the water, but it prevents the pasta from falling out. Okay, so sometimes, we need to let in certain things, but keep out other things. Or we need to let out certain things from within ourselves, but prevent other things from spilling out. So it's kind of like that picture in a lot of ways. I know it's like a little bit of a silly example with pasta, but it's really like a screen door rather than a solid door. Okay, because it's too solid, we're protected but not connected. And if it's too permeable, we're connected but not protected. Okay, so we need a little bit of both. So if a boundary is healthy, we can feel safe, secure, and comfortable in our relationships. Okay, so let's talk more about what healthy boundaries are, because if that's the goal, we might as well know more about what the goal is, correct? All right, so think about protected and connected. It rhymes, so it helps us to remember it. So when we protect ourselves, it's kind of like the picture I picked out here. It's like if you're going to a place and there's a guard booth with one of those, those poles that go across before they let you in. So they're determining if you should come in or if you should stay out, right? So when we protect ourselves, we try to make choices about what we're letting out based on our values, our own needs, our preferences, our rights as a human being, and our desires. So we're more thoughtfully determining these things. It's not just an emotional mind decision about, oh, gee, I better let this person into my life, or gee, I better spill this out. Okay, it's a little bit more thoughtful and wise mind, so to speak. And it helps us to orient toward certain people, experiences, and things that we want to orient toward. And it helps us to turn away from things that we don't want to be part of. Okay, but the choice is a key element here. And it gives us a better, when we're clear about it, it helps us to more clearly say yes or no and mean it. Okay. All right, so protected, connected. All right, when we connect with others, we're maintaining healthy relationships. And we all, at some level, we would like to have healthy relationships, right? And it helps us to feel appropriate feelings of closeness to the people that are appropriate to feel close to. And it helps us to respect other people's boundaries as well. So it's not just about us feeling comfortable, but we're acting in a way that allows others to feel comfortable with us, okay? All right, so another characteristic of healthy boundaries is that they're flexible. So you can think about Gumby, kind of like I have those Gumby pictures up in the upper right-hand corner, right? So it's important to be flexible. Flexibility in general is a sign of health, right? So our boundaries shouldn't be the same all the time and with everybody in every circumstance. It's important to kind of adjust based on what's going on, right? So it should shift according to our needs and preferences, or to who we're with or what situation we're in, okay? So the boundary we have with our significant other should be different than the boundary we have with a stranger. Or a boundary we have with a friend might be different than a boundary we have with an acquaintance or a coworker. So it should be different, right? And we should be able to make those adjustments as needed. Another thing that's kind of interesting too is that our physiological state could help determine what kind of boundary we're setting. So if you're not feeling your best, if you're kind of tired or stressed out, you might need a firmer boundary. It might be harder to let people in, or you might be afraid things are gonna fly out of your mouth, so you need a firmer boundary. Other times when you're more comfortable and relaxed, maybe it's easier to have an open boundary, and that makes more sense. Okay, so we could just kind of tune into ourselves and the situation to help determine what boundaries are going to work best for me today. Okay, all right. Now here's a key that isn't always discussed in other curriculums that I've seen. So this is about physically sensing and setting boundaries. Okay, so if you think about it, we physically feel a certain way when we know we need to set a boundary. There's a signal we get physiologically, besides just in our head, that, you know what, I think more of a boundary is necessary. Or maybe I'm comfortable with my boundary, or I think I need a closer relationship, less of a boundary. And if we get better at mindfully tuning into our own signals, we get better at using those clues to help us determine how to then set a boundary, okay? And then once we figure that out, we could also use our bodies to help us set the boundaries with other people. So we physiologically adjust ourselves to make our yes or no clearer to others and to ourselves, okay? So more about this. So here's an example. Physically sensing when we need a stronger boundary. So let's look at that picture, okay? So that guy's leaning in to kiss the girl, and she's kind of looking uncomfortable. Have you ever been in that situation and someone wants more closer contact than you want, and you feel yourself, pulling away or getting, I'm not sure if I want that. Okay, so what happens here physiologically? So there's a tightening, a tensing, a grimacing, right? There's a pulling away, a stern face. She might give certain verbal commands like, oh, stop, leave me alone, go away. She might literally move back and away, lean away, turn away, or perhaps even walk away or push away, like she's starting to do this with her hand, right? You can see the hands pushing. You also might have an erect spine, to kind of stiffen up, head up, shoulders square and back. So these signs that, like, if I notice myself doing that, that's a good sign that I need a stronger boundary here. This guy's making me feel violated or uncomfortable or whatever, and I need to set a firmer boundary here. It's my clue, okay? And if I tune into myself and my body and what it's doing, it makes it clearer to me that, you know what, something's not right here. I'm not feeling comfortable and I need to set a stronger boundary. All right. Now, what about when we're comfortable? Well, sometimes I am comfortable with certain people, right? Or we're with somebody that's, respectful to us or that we know well, we trust. And we could tune in and also sense when the boundary is comfortable. Oh, what does that feel like inside of me? So I might notice that I'm able to give that person comfortable eye contact. Looking at them doesn't make me feel like they're trying to seep into me and violate me in some way, okay? I might feel like my breath is more relaxed. I might notice I can smile. My body might be slightly turned toward the person or leaning into the person rather than pulling away like in the other slide. And I might feel just more relaxed, okay? So my social engagement system is active, and that's a sign that I'm comfortable. Okay. Other times, I might feel like too disconnected, that I wish I had a closer connection with this person, but I don't. And so I'm feeling in myself, if I tune into my body, that things are too distant, and I'm not comfortable with that. There's too much of a wall between me and that other person, and I wish I was closer. So there might be some patterns of feelings physiologically I might experience when I want that closer connection. All right. So here's a couple of versions of that. All right. So it just happens to be that they're photographs of children, but we experience that as adults as well. Okay. So let's look at the top picture first. So that little girl looks really upset and she's reaching for the adult. Maybe it's a parent. She probably feels at some level that I'm too distant. I need this closer connection right now. Okay. So she's looking longingly toward the person. She's crying or pouting. It's a signal cry. It's a cry for please come to me. Okay. She's leaning in toward the person. She's reaching out. So she might be feeling things such as scared, needy, helpless, clingy. I need someone right now. Okay. This is my attached defense. And we all have an attached defense because when we're children, we need adults to take care of us so we could survive. So we naturally have this desire to reach for people sometimes. Okay. On the other hand, you might feel disconnected and wish for a closer relationship, but you kind of shut down because you're not sure you're going to get it. So let's look at that little girl in the bottom picture. So she might be wishing that she was as close as the other family members across the room, but she's feeling left out. She's wishing that they would maybe reach out to her and pull her in. But there's a sense of like, if I reach out, I don't know if they're going to respond to me. So it's a little bit of a giving up here. So her head is down, avoiding eye contact and looking away, perhaps because if I look toward them, they may not look back, or I might get rejected if I reach toward them. A sad or still face, collapsed protective posture, because doesn't want to get further hurt by these people, right? Shut down, numb, heavy feeling, okay? And some of the emotions behind that, she might feel sad, rejected, hurt, lonely, and again, just maybe a feeling of giving up because she's not sure if it's going to happen for her. All right, so these are signs we can notice within ourselves that we want a looser boundary or a closer connection with somebody. All right, so let's bring it back to childhood again. Okay, so before we were able to talk, we used our bodies to set boundaries. Okay, so when we didn't know what to say, we used our physiological body language to push people away. So let's look at the first picture, okay? So the boy is crying, I think it's a boy, I'm not sure, and covering his face. The mother's reaching toward him, but he's pulling away and covering his eyes because he's trying to set a distance. The boy in the middle picture is kind of inching his way away from his, mother and pushing away from her, okay? Now looking at her also. However, the little girl perhaps on the right looks like she's comfortable with the boundary with her mother. She's leaning in, she's smiling, she's kind of cuddled into her mother. So that boundary to her probably feels comfortable. So in all cases, the children may not be saying anything, but their bodies are conveying what their boundary needs are, okay? And even though they're children, that desire to, and that ability to set boundaries, the importance of setting boundaries with our physical selves continues into adulthood, okay? So one of the elements that's often missing in boundary work is this body sense of boundaries. A lot of times there's a focus on assertiveness and what we say, but we also have to have our boundaries go along with what we say and realize that we have to make our physical selves convey the boundary as well, okay? All right, next. Okay, so I'm gonna go over two main types of boundaries that are gonna be discussed in sensory motor psychotherapy. So one of them is physical boundaries, and there's two parts to that. So this has to do with, one, the physical distance and space between you and another person, okay? So if you look at the picture, that woman is tending a little garden to create a space around herself, between herself and the other people. So this is kind of like an invisible thing, but you kind of sense when somebody's stepping a little too close to you or violating your space boundaries in a certain kind of a way, all right? And that's even without the touching. But the second part does have to do with touching, right? So the other part of physical boundaries is who is allowed to touch you and where and how they're allowed to touch you, okay? And obviously that varies depending on the person and the kind of relationship you have. And determining what's appropriate, what feels comfortable in that sense is also very, very important, okay? And just so there's a little sidebar, it was a little hard to organize this material, and I didn't want things too separate from the exercises, so you could have it fresh in your mind when you do exercises. So there's more details about these types of boundaries a little later in the lesson because the exercises for them follow. Okay, so just file this away for now, but more details are coming in a few minutes, all right? All right, so anyway, next, they talk about internal boundaries. So look at the icons here. So you have a thought bubble and a heart, okay? So internal boundaries have to do with our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our opinions, and how those are protected within us, okay? What's the boundary around what we really think and believe, and what other people think and believe, and what thoughts and feelings are mine, and what thoughts and feelings are yours, okay? So we have to feel, in order to feel protected in terms of internal boundaries, we have to feel that we're free to choose our own opinions, that we're not overly influenced by others, or that we're kind of shaping our feelings and opinions based on what other people are telling us, or based on trying to please other people, okay? So as it says here, internal boundaries affirm and enforce our right to our own opinions, beliefs, and feelings, even if they're different from other people, okay? So I could feel one thing and you could feel another thing in the same situation, or I could have one opinion and you could have a different opinion. So when I have clear, healthy internal boundaries, I'm allowing for that to be different. And it doesn't have to make me right or wrong, and it doesn't have to make you right or wrong, okay? So we can separate our opinions, thoughts, and feelings from those of other people, so we're not unduly swayed when others try to convince us how to feel or think. All right, so let's think about it. Are you coming in, let's say, with a certain opinion about topic A, and then someone you're talking to has a different opinion, and now you suddenly feel like you need to shift your opinion to make it like the other person's? All right, has that ever happened to you? All right, sometimes it could feel like, in order to please that person, in order for them to still like me, in order to maintain this relationship, I better sculpt my thoughts and feelings to match that of the other person, okay? So if you find yourself doing that, it's a little bit of a violation of your internal boundaries. You're not able to hold on to what you truly think and feel, because as soon as someone else thinks something else, you're ready to let it go, okay? Could be the same thing for values as well. You might hold certain values to be important to you, but as soon as there's pressure from other people, you might throw it out the window. Okay, so be very careful about that. All right, so we're open to other perspectives, but we make up our own minds and allow our feelings to guide us. Okay, so I'm not saying that this is what I think and I'm not hearing anything. I'm not listening to anybody else's opinion. Okay, no, I could consider other opinions, and sometimes it is appropriate to change my mind, but I'm still not gonna just let it go for no reason. Like if I change my opinion, it's for a good reason, all right? Okay, so healthy internal boundaries. It's also about taking responsibility, okay? So I own my thoughts and feelings. I don't blame other people for how I feel. Ever get in a situation where, you said, screw you, you made me so angry. How dare you? You ruined my day because you did this to me and you made me so upset, okay? So that's not fair, because although that person may have triggered you, you're still responsible for your own reaction, okay? So you have to own what you're really thinking and feeling. We also allow other people to have their thoughts and feelings without feeling overly responsible for them, okay? Did you ever get into the opposite mode where you're like, oh my God, it's all my fault. I said something and now she's so upset and she's so mad at me and what did I do? And we would do that blame game of ourselves because we think, oh my God, I had so much influence over this person and I ruined their life and I upset them. Okay, well, that's not fair either, because the other person's also responsible for his or her feelings and thoughts and actions, okay? So it's kind of accepting that both of us have responsibility for our response. And that's a sign of healthy internal boundaries. Okay, so remember, protected and connected. Okay, so healthy internal boundaries allow us to stay connected even when we think and feel different things from another person. Now, on some intellectual level, I do understand that this seems extremely obvious. Well, of course we can't all be the same. I mean, obviously we're different people. We're all unique, like, snowflakes or whatever, right? But on some level, this is a total revelation. Okay. You might have lived a good piece of your life feeling like, unless we're the same, there's no way we could stay connected. That I had to sacrifice my thoughts or feelings to be like you, or I should persuade you to think like me and feel like me so we could stay connected. All right. But it's actually possible for us to be different and still have a good relationship. Okay, it actually is true. Okay, so we don't have to force ourselves to be like the other person, and we don't have to force the other person to be like us. We can respect our differences. Okay, next. All right. So, as you've noticed in other videos that I've done for sensory motor psychotherapy, there's always a component where we kind of trace back to how did we get to be this way based on our history. So our boundary styles are definitely highly influenced by the way we grew up in our families, okay? And based on the way we were treated and the way boundaries were handled, all right? So we learn about boundaries in the context of our family dynamics. And we also internalize the reasons why we should or should not set boundaries, okay? So let's get into detail about this. So on the healthier side, if you happen to be lucky enough to have been in an upbringing that created healthy boundaries, this is probably what happened. So our parents respected our boundaries as well as their own boundaries. So they modeled healthy boundaries for us, okay? And they taught us to respect the boundaries of other people, whether it's people within the family or outside the family. And we got the subtle message that all people have a right to their boundaries, to their space, to their thoughts and feelings, to their physical, protection, all that stuff. And we learned, without even being taught consciously, how to send nonverbal messages that clearly convey our boundaries. So when I say yes, my body also is saying yes. And when I say no, my body is also conveying that no. Okay. So this is if we were lucky. Not all of us were that lucky. Okay. So upbringings that create unhealthy boundaries. So if that is the case, you were given an unfortunate choice. So you had to choose between taking care of yourself and setting your own boundaries and keeping a good, loving relationship with your parents. You weren't allowed to have both, as people are allowed to have here. So here you could stay protected and connected. You could connect with your family and have a right to have your own space and boundaries. But when it's an unhealthy situation, you have to choose. So either you have the relationship when your boundaries are violated, or you have your boundaries, but the relationship suffers. Okay. And that's a terrible choice to have to be put in to make, especially as a child. Because when you're a kid, you need the adults in your life. You really are kind of put in a position where you have to choose the relationship over yourself. Okay. And in some cases, we have to sacrifice our boundaries to maintain the love, care, and approval of our parents. Okay. And then guess what? Those patterns then last into our life, even when we're older, even when we don't need our parents to survive. But it creates other problems in our adult relationships. Okay. So these are to me, some excellent examples. I did not make them up myself. I got them from the textbook, but it's really a great illustration of how earlier experiences then impact our boundaries today. Okay. So in some cases, we're kind of punished for setting boundaries in some kind of way, whether in a subtle way or in a very blatant or overt way. So in some cases, all right, our caregivers may have insisted on determining what was best for us, but they failed to validate our own preferences or needs. Okay. I think you should be in sports. I think you should be studying all the time. I think you should take piano lessons. I think you should be a good girl, right? So they might have had ideas about how we should be, but ignored our individual, desires or preferences or talents or whatever and they kind of wanted us to be who they wanted us to be. And we are forced to kind of do that in order to maintain the relationship. So if that was the case later on, we still might be unclear about who we are, what our needs are, or what our wants are, or what we like. And we might turn to others to find out what our opinions are or should be, right? It's hard to just establish what they are now because they weren't allowed to exist back then. We were told you need to be playing soccer. You need to be getting good grades. So we never had a chance to explore what we really wanted. Okay, so now we're still turning to other people to find out. Okay, next, second photo. If we tried to set boundaries, our parents might have ignored us, punished or rejected us, or withdrew their love. Okay, so look at that picture. So let's say, you know, that father is now giving the kid a little bit of a silent treatment because the kid wanted some space, right? No, Dad, I don't really want to play right now. I want to go to my room by myself. What, you don't want to play with your father? Oh, you know, oh, now the kid's feeling guilty about it. He's not allowed to just have his space without punishment, right? There's like a subtle, like kind of, oh, that wasn't a good choice. Now I don't love you as much because I would have loved you more if you spent time with me, or if you sat on my lap, or if you did whatever, okay? So what happens later on? We may have gotten the message that we shouldn't hurt people's feelings. Our parents were hurt by our boundary setting. And now if we continue to set boundary, we're going to hurt other people. They're going to be mad at us. They're not going to like us as much. And it might even end the relationship. So I may be very hesitant now to set boundaries because of that early experience. So we might have learned that we have to do what others want in order to keep that relationship. Okay, third picture. If our parents viewed our attempts to set boundaries as controlling or selfish, we might still feel guilty about setting a boundary, or be concerned about coming across as self-centered, controlling, or egotistical, okay? Big issue for a lot of people, right? If I say no to you and what you're asking me to do, you're gonna think I'm selfish. I just wanna do everything, you know, you don't wanna help me out? You don't wanna do this favor for me? Oh, you're so selfish, right? A lot of people have it in their mind or in their hearts that not doing what someone is asking you to do is gonna make you look selfish. Okay. And sometimes that still is the message we get, you know, and it reinforces those earlier messages. Okay. All right. Some more examples here. So caregivers may have given us the message that we need to pay them back, or when they do something nice for us, by letting them violate our boundaries in some way. Okay. How does this play out in adulthood? Okay. So I'm on a date with somebody. He buys me a big dinner. He takes me out to a show. He spent a lot of money on me. And now I feel obliged to go back to his apartment with him, even though I'm not really sure I want to. Okay. Happens when you're a kid sometimes too. You know, hey, I took you to the park and now come back and do what grandpa wants you to do. Okay. Really uncomfortable. Okay. So also, in some sense, you might have the sense of duty. Like, I owe this person something. Or if I'm being a good girl or I'm being responsible, then I need to allow them to violate my boundaries to, you know, to like kind of pay them back. And that's a responsible thing to do, to owe someone something when you owe them. All right, next one. Unwanted physical or sexual contact. It overrides our boundaries. It blasts through our boundaries. We might feel like we don't even have a right to our boundaries because they were not respected at all. They were blatantly violated, okay? And it definitely makes for a very hard situation when you're older, when you feel like anyone can just violate your boundaries in such a terrible way at any time. And you might feel like, because I was completely unsuccessful at setting a boundary back then because I was too little and it was impossible, there's no way I'm going to be successful now. So why even try? Okay. Really difficult situation, but we still can learn some of the techniques from here to help. Okay. All right. So last one. So if we found that our no's weren't acceptable when we grew up, people feel successful. So we may not even know how to match our body language with our no now because we have all these hesitations, all this baggage with us. Okay. So if you go to some kind of assertiveness training, right, where you learn about assertiveness and you know the word you're supposed to say, you know your dear man skill, for example, in DBT, you know, being assertive, asking for what you want. But because of all these other hesitations, because of your past, your body language may not match and it may not really work for you. Okay. Same thing with the fast skill from DBT, also about keeping self-respect. If you don't really feel like you have a desire, you have the ability or the right to keep self-respect by maintaining a boundary, it may not fully work for you because you're not 100% in. Okay. Part of you's hesitating and part of you's going for it. Okay, so we need to look at those things, those procedural memory things that get in our way. Okay, so here's the exercises. Okay, now, okay, so nonverbal boundary setting. All right, so I touched on this earlier. So now in this exercise, we're going to practice these techniques. Okay, so in the next slide, it's going to ask you to try these things out, but let's go over what these things are. So examples of how to set boundaries by using your nonverbals, your body language. Use your facial expression. Look at that girl. She's trying to set a boundary with her face, okay? How could you experiment with your face to make it clear no? Narrow your eyes, glare at somebody, tighten your jaw, cross your arms in front of your chest, all right? Like the second picture, the guy's leaning back and away. He's pushing away with his hand. He's pulling his head away, avoiding eye contact, making a stop sign with his hand, kind of also like the girl here, right? Also saying no with your body, clenching your fists. That person's pounding his fist on the table. It really means no, all right? It's a pretty clear no. So these are just some examples of ways you could set a boundary with your body. Now, okay, so we want you to try some of these physical boundary setting actions that we just went over. If possible, if you have a therapist, you could practice with your therapist or maybe with somebody you trust. Or if you're doing it by yourself, that's okay. You could also try looking in a mirror just to kind of see what it looks like, all right? So as you try these things, we want you to check in with yourself. Think about which actions felt familiar to you and which felt unfamiliar, right? Maybe you've tried some before and they're comfortable. Maybe other ones feel a little less comfortable. So what situations in your past or present do the familiar actions remind you of? Okay, because maybe you've done them before, you've seen them before. Which actions felt good and which actions didn't feel good? All right, not that there's a right or wrong answer, just check in. And interesting question, are there any actions that felt more aligned with the person you are today rather than the person you were in the past? And if so, which ones? Okay, so even if you haven't done some of these before too much, maybe you're like, you know what? I am somebody who's a little more confident now and a little more sure of myself. And when I do that, do this certain action, it kind of goes in line with that of how I'm starting to feel about myself now. It reinforces this feeling I have about who I am. And maybe that's a good thing. Okay, so file some of these things away. Okay, so this next exercise is about physical boundaries. Okay, and so it's going to ask you to think about times when your different types of physical distance and touch boundaries are violated. So I'm going to go over examples here, and then there's going to be some questions about that. Okay, so keep these in mind for the next part of the exercise. So let's say you're maintaining a physical distance with somebody, but there's still things they can do, even in that distance, that make you feel violated. So if someone's sitting 12 feet away from you, but he's staring at you, it still kind of could feel violating, all right? Or if someone's talking or yelling up in your face, is closing that physical gap, that could be very uncomfortable. Someone standing too close to you, such as standing in line or standing in an elevator, standing on a subway, standing at a party, okay? Someone sitting too close to you. Ever go to a party and someone's on a couch just like a few inches too close and it feels really weird, okay? Someone talking at you in a derogatory or threatening way, okay? That could just be a voice from across the room, but it could still feel like it's seeping into your boundaries, right? Someone making threatening or insulting facial expressions, okay? Being looked at in a sexual way. In that picture, the guy's right next to the girl, but this could also be from across the room, of course. Or someone making obscene gestures at you, all right? If someone gave you the finger in another car, that could still feel like a violation, right? All right, so next, physical contact by boundary violations. Okay, so when does someone violate your boundaries? By touching or making physical contact in a way that feels really intrusive and uncomfortable, okay? If you're hit or pushed by somebody, if you're physically, injured by somebody, if you were being held down or someone grabbed your wrist or arm, okay, that's a little more extreme, but I know, some of us have been through that, right? Being touched in a car, room, or corner where you couldn't escape, okay? So look at the picture here. Let's say you were out with somebody, he was driving you around or she was driving you around, you're in the person's car, and you can't really just jump out of the car sometimes, you know, and they use that as an opportunity to violate your physical boundaries because you can't really get away from it. It's a perfect opportunity, so to speak, okay? Being tickled when you didn't want it. All right, so those are just some examples of physical boundary violations that could really make you uncomfortable. Other ones on the bottom, sorry, I forgot about that. Someone brushing up against you. Oops, it was an accident. Whether or not it was an accident, it could feel very uncomfortable. Forced physical contact, such as being forced or made to hug, kiss, or sit on someone's lap, right? Sometimes even when you're a kid, it could seem subtle, but you may not want to kiss your great aunt or something on the cheek, or you may not want your grandpa kissing you on the lips or making you sit on his lap, right? All those things could feel weird to a kid, and it can make it feel weird to an adult too, right? Someone demanding or forcing sexual contact, someone touching you when you didn't want to be touched or in a way you didn't want to be touched, okay? And that could be something subtle, but you know, oh, look at the picture. It's a boss touching her shoulders. I know it's just her shoulders, but a boss touching her shoulders could be really uncomfortable, okay? If it's the wrong time, the wrong person, the wrong situation, any kind of touch could feel uncomfortable, okay? All right, so now that we went over these, we're going to explore them in this exercise. So I want you to think about experiences with physical boundaries as a child and as an adult, okay? I'm sure as we went through these examples, there were things that stood out with you that you've been through, okay? I think we've all been through at least some of them, okay? So think about which types of physical distance and physical contact boundary violations you've experienced before, okay? And then try to choose 3 of them to explore in this exercise, okay? And again, use your judgment. I don't want to overly trigger anybody, so if this is too much for you to do today, then you don't have to do it today. But if you're up for it, you could do this exercise, okay? So think about what's the situation you were in when your physical distance or physical contact boundary was violated, okay? What was your body response, right? What was the signal your body was giving you that you were uncomfortable, that your boundary was violated? Remember we talked about that early in the lesson, right? How did you handle the situation? And if you were to do it over again now, how might you handle it differently if you feel like you weren't happy with the way you handled it before? Okay, or it could be that when you were a kid, you were limited in how you could handle it, but now if it happened to you as an adult, you have more ability to handle it in a new way, okay? Or with more coping skills, you have ability to handle it in a new way, all right? And this is not to arouse any sense of guilt or shame, or I should have did this, or I should have did that. We're learning, okay? So this is not a shame and blame game. This is a learning experience, okay? Next, okay, so this is the internal boundaries. This has to do, again, with our thoughts and our feelings, that I can maintain the way I feel, and you can maintain the way you feel, and I could think one thing and you could think another thing, and we could still have a connection anyway, okay? However, sometimes, you know, we struggle with that. So, number 1, think about a time when you had a conflict with someone because he or she had a different or opposing opinion, belief, or feeling to yours, okay? And sometimes this might be in the context of somebody that you're close to or want to be close to, and that there was some kind of frustration because you weren't the same, all right? How did the conflict affect your body? Or how does remembering the conflict affect your body right now? Now, just bringing it to mind, what is that doing to you? So imagine if you were to redo the situation and you had a good internal boundary. So you were able to acknowledge that each of you had a right to your own thoughts, opinions, feelings, beliefs, right? And it wasn't like one person was trying to persuade another, which may have been part of the conflict, right? So let's say we're both allowing each other to have our differences and it's okay. So when you imagine it that way, now what happens to your body? How is it affecting your building blocks now? So describe this feeling, this somatic sense of having a good boundary in that situation. What does it feel like in your body to have a good boundary in that situation? Describe how you imagine this sense of internal boundary could affect the conflict. Maybe there wouldn't have even been a conflict. Maybe it would have been resolved faster, right? So think about that. Then list some possible future conflicts you might have with others where having this sense of good internal boundaries could help. You know, are there situations you're anticipating when you might squabble with somebody about a belief or opinion or a feeling or something like that, a reaction, and it would help just to acknowledge we're different, okay? So how could the sense of somatic internal boundaries help you in the future? All right, I think this is an awesome exercise. That's just my editorial opinion, okay? So in this exercise, you're gonna practice saying yes, not just verbally, but also with your body. I love this one. So number one, describe what happens in your body when you say yes out loud. So just practice it. Just say yes, yes, yes. Okay, say it in different ways. And then notice what happens to your body as you keep saying yes to something. Okay, then without saying anything, try to communicate a yes with just your body. Okay, so look at those pictures. Jim Carrey and that other lady are saying yes with their body. You can look at them and tell if they're saying yes to something, right? So how could you say yes with your body? So when you're clear about your yes, you want to be able to convey it. So that's why we're practicing this. So number three, describe 3 situations in which you would like to be able to say yes. Maybe it's something where you said no before, but you want to be more open about and more sure about your yes now. Maybe some friends are inviting you on a hiking trip upstate, and you're always saying no because you're thinking, oh, geez, and you have to spend the day with them. And what if I'm socially awkward? And what if this or what if that? But you really kind of secretly want to say yes. So how do you say yes to them in a more sure, confident way? All right. So choose one of those situations where you'd like to practice saying yes, and then practice taking the body posture of yes, and describe what happens as you imagine yourself in that situation. So rehearse it in your mind while you're doing that body posture and try to picture how that goes. All right. So we're going to flip it around and say no this time. So same idea, but we're going to say no. So first, you're going to practice saying no out loud. No, no, no. Okay. As you keep saying no, notice what happens to your body. Then try communicating no with just your body. How do you make that no really clear? You could look in a mirror while you're doing this if you want, or do it with a friend or a therapist. How do you make your no really clear with your nonverbals? Now, describe 3 situations in which you'd like to be able to say no more clearly. Maybe your cousin's asking you for a favor and you really want to say no, but you've been kind of saying yes because you feel bad and you don't want them to be mad at you, right? One of those kinds of things, but you really kind of want to say no. All right, so practice rehearsing that situation in your mind, saying no with your words and saying no with your body posture, and describe what that feels like. What happens in that situation when you imagine it that way, okay? All right, this one I'll have to say editorially is also a very cool exercise. Oh, excuse me, a lot of talking today. My mouth is getting dry. Okay, so this one is called a tangible boundary exercise. So what you're going to do is you're going to sit down on the floor and you're going to surround yourself with stuff that creates a kind of a boundary. And you could be creative about what this stuff is. It could be your kids' toys. It could be pillows. It could be piles of laundry. It could be groceries from your pantry. Whatever it is, surround yourself with some stuff that creates a boundary and just sit in it for a minute. And notice how your body feels as you're sitting in this little fortress that you made. And if you feel that there's still a part of yourself that feels kind of vulnerable, exposed, you could add more things around that part of your body. So let's say I still feel like my back is a little exposed or a little vulnerable. I could put more stuff behind me, and that could maybe shift the way I feel, okay? And I know on some level, when we're just talking about it now, it seems like, oh, come on. You know, I was putting a few things around me, like a 1-foot wall, really going to make a difference. But trust me, when you do it, it actually feels like something. It feels like a little more secure or something like that. You're gonna see. So you're gonna notice that what it feels like in your body to sit in this boundary fortress that you made. And it's important to kind of file away in your mind what this felt like. Okay, so you could then maybe recreate that feeling in circumstances in your life where you actually need it. Okay. So as it says in the last bullet point here, take a few minutes to sense your space within the boundary you created. And then we're going to answer the following questions. Okay. So how does your body respond to this tangible boundary? Right? Does it affect your breathing, your tension, your posture? Okay. Then look at your building blocks. How does it affect your thoughts, your emotions, the way your body moves or wants to move, body sensations, sense perceptions, etc. Okay. And even, are there any memories that emerge? You know, sometimes we associate the current feeling to a past feeling. Okay. How could you use the somatic sense of a tangible boundary in your life? Okay. Where in your life do you feel like you want to recreate that more secure, protected feeling? Okay. And, you know, how could I start to do that? Identify some situations when this could be an exercise. Okay. You could even sit in your little fortress and imagine yourself in those situations. So while you're feeling more secure, right, put yourself into those situations where you feel less secure in your mind, and it might be able to place that secure feeling there while you're imagining it. And it could affect the real life situation. Okay, so boundaries respected and breached. Okay, so we're going to trace back in time a little bit. So think about a time when your boundaries were respected. And then also think about a time when your boundaries were breached, whether it's a physical boundary or, you know, a different kind of boundary, right? An intellectual, emotional boundary, right? Internal boundary. And as you're thinking about each situation, notice how your building blocks are affected. Okay. So when you're thinking about a time when your boundaries were respected, how does it affect your building blocks? When you're thinking about a time when your boundaries were breached, how does that affect your building blocks? Okay. So just to notice, be aware. And that's it. All right, we made it. I know, I understand this was long, but I hope some of this material was helpful to you and will be useful in your future endeavors about, you know, creating more successful boundaries in your life. All right, so thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye, everybody.